turn it over to you.
Are you there?
Rob made it.
Yep, go ahead, Amy.
Okay, so it's me now? Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't tell. Okay, it is 5:32 and I'm going to call the Public Health and Safety Committee meeting to order. I do have several items on the agenda tonight. The first one is to reappropriate capital improvement funds for the fire department. So this money that they needed, they didn't spend as much from the original ask. And there is some additional equipment. Believe it's for the breathing apparatus that they needed to get. So they just wanted the money that was already once appropriated, they want to get that money back so that they're able to, there was some change in the amount of the cost on that. I don't know if anyone's on from the fire department right now or not. I did speak with them about it.
Yep, Chief is on, I think.
Hello, everyone.
Hi,
Yes,
Chief Cleveland.
Yeah, basically, there was $170,000 appropriated for SCBA, self-contained breathing apparatus. Our cost for that actually came in at $141,000. So the remaining $29,000 we're asking to be reappropriated to a new fund so that we can use it towards the purchase of needed rescue equipment for the new engine. And with $29,000, that would help us out quite a bit to get some of that equipment.
Yeah, and the money you saved on was from the breathing ones, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I remember Mark, explaining all that to me. So it's money that was already once appropriated, and it is for supplies for the fire department. I don't know if anybody has a problem with that, or if we can just go ahead and move that forward. I personally don't have a problem with it. I don't know if Matt or Rob have any questions on it. But if not, I'd like to just move it forward to finance.
Sounds good.
Who is that?
Thank you.
Rob?
Yeah, I'm okay with it as well, Amy.
Okay. All right. So that was
Thank
pretty
you.
easy. You're welcome. And thank you for calling me and talking with me about this prior to the meeting. Having Mark call, I appreciate it. So
No problem.
okay. Next item is to accept the Charlestown Township sub-grant agreement. And this is money that they will possibly have left over from the CARES Act, is what Brian told me just a little bit ago. We talked about it. They're not able to spend all the money. And so we're able to get a cost of that or some of that money to us. So because, they do, we do their dispatch. So anyways, we don't know the amount yet. The official contract is not completed, but this would be one of those situations, as Bruce would say, take the money and run. So I'm not sure. Brian, is there anything else that you want to explain about this to discuss?
Yeah, I think you got it pretty well. Basically they have the choice, if they don't spend the money, to either, well, they're supposed to return it to the county, but instead, since we do provide their EMS service and we also provide their dispatch service, they would like to give it to us so we can apply it to our stuff, because it indirectly benefits them as well. So,
Absolutely.
So yeah, they're going to meet officially, I think next week. I think they said the 23rd. The trustees will meet, and they have to put this vote on this, and every indication is it'll pass. If it doesn't pass, then we don't get it. But assuming it passes, they're indicating $40,000 to $60,000 that they'll be able to give to us in their unspent CARES money.
Okay, that's awesome. So I'm glad that we are able to have that great relationship with them and, you know, able to receive that to help us out as well. So does anybody have a problem with accepting this?
Hopefully not.
No? Okay, we'll go ahead and move that forward. Is there any management updates on tonight's agenda from management? Okay, hearing none, I will go ahead and at 5:37, I will close the Public Health and Safety Committee meeting.
I assume I'm next. Okay,
Yes.
so at 5:37, I will call the planning committee meeting to order. The agenda as presented has been altered a bit. We're foregoing the first item. And Bob, you want us to postpone the Meridian parking lot issue as well, correct? Bob?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
On next month's agenda then?
I don't know. We'll see. There's no hurry. I just wanted to discuss it.
Okay, we'll keep that in the back burner.
Yeah, no problem.
So then the first item is the annual codified ordinance update approval. I thought we were doing this semi-annually. Anyway, that's just kind of housekeeping where we update our changes with the vendor that provides our ordinances, correct, Chelsea?
Yes. Oh, sorry, that was me.
Okay,
So
answer is the one we need.
every time that the ordinance is updated, council has to approve it.
Right.
So this is the approval. But another thing that I want to bring up is that twice a year, we would get paper copy updates and it would be updated online twice a year. Now,
Oh,
times have changed and it is costly to get it done. I'm suggesting to only get it printed once a year and then have it updated online twice a year. So, but I mean, that could be a separate subject, but right now this is just approval of the updates.
right. Okay, so we okay to move that forward? And again, it's just really housekeeping.
Yes.
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 All right, thank you. Next item is a resolution of support to spend the Jack Schaefer Endowment. So I believe it was today that we got the memorandum and the listing of projects. I actually did kind of read through it and had some questions about this. I'm not sure who's able to answer it. I don't see our law director on the, is Frank there, Andrew?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes.
No, I meant Frank. Frank Seaman.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, okay, good. But the mayor is actually our representative, correct, on this commission?
Yes.
Okay, good. So you could help me answer one question, which is, I thought the amount was $100,000.
That's correct.
Well, so my first question then is simply why, I mean, the second item on their list is $182 plus. I guess I'm confused about the list.
The plan is to raise money to fund all of these. These projects were submitted by, we advertised for them, and various schools and people involved submitted their projects that they'd like to have done, and that's the laundry list that you see of things that were proposed. The double check marks mean it's both the city and the township. There's just one where the township would not benefit from that. I have to tell you that digitizing the newspapers at the library is a very expensive proposition.
Oh, yeah, I know.
And, they have a minimum amount that you have to do before they'll do it, before they'll come in and do it. There has to be a certain volume. I'm not even sure that 182 even meets that, to tell you the truth.
That's a lot of years.
Yeah, now, this means that the library is not going to get funded that amount. That- Probably these other things are all, you can figure they're going to be funded. But the goal is to raise money. This group will raise money so that it can all be done. It's a very valuable thing for the library to have this stuff digitized. It's much easier for people to search for things that they're looking for.
Right.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. So my concern about the actual resolution is that this MOU is I mean, it does, there's a lot of verbiage in here, but fundamentally what this does is allow the 3 members of the commission who are not representatives of the city or the township to make a final determination if there's any dispute, not to say that there will be, but if there's any dispute about how the money is spent, then it's the non-representatives that get to resolve that dispute. And that's really what this resolution is all about.
That's correct.
So my only concern then is it only talks about the contingent bequest. It doesn't talk about other monies that may be raised. So, and then it does say that the city is responsible for paying all the invoices. So, and believe me, I'm not suggesting this is going to happen, likely to happen, a probability, but it is a possibility that if things come in over budget, that is over $100,000, this kind of says we're on the hook for any additional funding, assuming that the non-representatives of the township and city vote to fund those things. The only thing I was going to suggest is if it's possible to include a little statement in that second to last whereas to say that, you know, the city's responsible for payment of any invoices so as the total of those invoices don't exceed the bequest amount.
That's, yes, you're talking about the 100,000.
Well, again, I don't, whatever the number is,
That's
it
what
doesn't
it
say
is.
100,000 in here, which is another interesting thing to note. But I just don't want the city to be on the hook for any additional funds.
Right.
We wouldn't necessarily want to pay. We could certainly have a separate resolution to fund some other, so for example, if we got some sort of digitization project in the library underway and the city was supportive of it, but I don't know that it should be part of this resolution.
Okay, well, I don't have a problem with limiting it to the 100,000. Peggy put this together, and I gave her a copy of the memorandum that we had with Mr. West as kind of a template, but it's not an easy transfer. And actually, I thought she did a pretty decent job with it, considering that's what she was working from. This request for how are you going to resolve issues when you're deadlocked, that came from the people who are overseeing the money, the lawyer and his significant other. They wanted, and their recommendation was to go to probate court. We did not want to get involved with the courts. That's why we wanted to find another way that would be acceptable to them to resolve the disputes.
I'm okay with that part of it, as long as everybody else is. I just want to make sure we have a, fail-safe mechanism to cut off whatever our responsibility is at the amount of the bequest.
We can put that 100,000 limit in there. That's not a problem. When she submitted this, she was looking for if anybody had any suggestions. So that's actually what we're doing.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions or concerns about this?
And if you have more, get a hold of me, because this is just hopefully going to be moved on to finance, and there is time to make other adjustments if you think they need to be made.
No, I think Rob brought up a very valid point, and I support what you say on that.
Okay.
If there aren't any other questions or comments, then we'll move this one forward too.
Okay.
All right, next item on the agenda, last item, is the cemetery union. So, can't remember the exact date, but a week or so ago, we met. It was Andrew, mayor, law director, myself, and then their legal representative, Chad Murdoch. Hank was there, a trustee, and I forget the woman's name who was I guess their clerk or
Ms. Pittman.
officer. And so you kind of already know the history behind this is they after inheriting another cemetery, they have concerns about their ability to financially support Maple Grove. And of course, we have an agreement with them that bases the cost of how it's run on property values within the township and the city, and that's a proportion of how much each entity pays towards a 300,000 or so budget to run the cemetery. So back in June, I think they sent a letter wanting to exit the agreement we have with them. Initially, they proposed a 3-year plan, and then when we had a meeting with them not too long ago, the proposal went to 5 years. When we met with them this last time, they basically put a figure out there that they're willing to pay $25,000. So their desire is to either exit. I think their ultimate desire is to exit the agreement and not have to support Maple Grove. But it's possible that they're willing to settle, and I don't know if that's necessarily the right term, at paying a fixed amount. So about an hour ago, so I just threw this together pretty quickly, and I'm sorry I couldn't provide it before the meeting. I kind of listed what I think are 4 options for the city to respond or consider in response to their request. So the first is simply allowing them out. You know, we could engage in one of those 3 options that they've put on the table. You know, we could let them go immediately, I suppose, which they didn't ask for. We could give them the 3-year out or the 5-year out. Or we could just figure out a fixed amount. So obviously those first 2 or so, allowing them out of the agreement completely at some point means that ultimately they're responsible for the full freight of running the cemetery. Now, the option of giving them fixed amount, and by the way, I think the $25,000, and Andrew can correct me, or the mayor, or Frank Semino can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's somewhat negotiable. They kind of even said that. So if that were an option the city wanted to consider, I think we could probably pin them down for maybe, you know, a little more than that, maybe even twice as much. I'm not exactly sure. They didn't give us any real indication, but I think it could go higher than 25,000. Not to say that I'm proposing or promoting that idea. But the one thing that I think it calls into question is whether or not we have if we did that option, whether or not we had a union cemetery anymore. Because our agreement is based upon certain parameters that are established in the Ohio Revised Code. And one of them establishes like the cost of acquiring a cemetery, or it's called the apportionment of expense based upon those property values. So for us to arbitrarily say they only owe this fixed amount, not an amount based upon property values, I don't know if we can call it a union cemetery anymore. So if we went that route, the possibility is that we'd have to try to come up with a completely different type of agreement, because we may no longer have a union cemetery or qualify for one. So that's one thing. So the next option would be that we basically don't do anything. You know, we say, look, you know, we get into this agreement. It was even revised a few years later, and we're not really it's really not up to us personally. I mean, we're all representatives in one way or fashion of the city. And the question I proposed was, if we were to allow them out of this agreement, how does that benefit the city? And if it doesn't benefit the city, then I have a great deal of trouble letting them out of the agreement. It's not that I'm not sympathetic. I understand their predicament. And certainly they didn't foresee having these extra expenses. But then what really happens is then we're taking on the extra burden. In other words, they're passing on this burden that they inherited, and then, you know, they're passing it on to us in a sense, because now
Right.
we have to pay the full freight of a cemetery that historically was, and we had the history of it at a previous meeting, that the city really never had, you know, control of this cemetery exclusively. We only entered into this after a lawsuit that ended, you know, I'm not going to go through the history again, but just keep in mind that, you know, it's difficult for me to justify letting them out of the agreement and for the city to take on that expense. But the interesting thing is, if we don't want to sort of engage the dissembling of that agreement, we don't have to do anything. Unless some of us on council wish it to come to a vote, our response really is a non-action. We just keep things the way they are. We don't have to take a vote to keep an agreement that's already in place. We just don't have to do anything. And so, okay, so the last option, and I know the initial reaction, and you've heard me say this before, but is to initiate a tax levy. And I have a few points about that for you to consider before your knee-jerk reaction is, no, we don't want our residents to pay any more than they're already paying. The first item I'll tell you is the levy tax, and I'm pretty sure I got this right, but I certainly do want to have someone check my thoughts on this, is it would not require a vote. As long as it's less than 10 mil, all we do is have an agreement. We have a meeting in May. It has to be in May, according to Ohio Revised Code. At the same time, we'd have our regular meeting. We'd have a joint meeting with the township. And then collectively, the body of the council and the township trustees would vote. And if there's a majority opinion to levy a certain amount, as long as it's not more than 10 mil, then we can do that without going to the voters. And then the next January, the tax would be in place. So the earliest we could do this would be January 2022, right? So keep that in mind, because I know a lot of people are like, well, we're in the middle of a pandemic and all that other stuff. So timing is important. But again, it would have to be a majority. Now, if you do the math, that puts us in the driver's seat. But I don't know where any of you are necessarily with a tax levy. A 1 mil tax levy, 1 mil, will pay 110% of the cemetery budget as presented to us last January. So, and a 1 mil levy is for every house assessed at 100,000, and the assessed value is what, like 35% of the actual marketing value. So anybody who owns a house assessed at $100,000, that's $100 a year. It's not a very high amount. So that's kind of, you know, putting on the table. They asked us at this meeting to at least present to City Council, you know, their concerns. And you know, Andrew and I said we do that, and that's what we're doing tonight. I asked them, because I know what the initial reaction was from at least one of their trustees, to put the idea of a tax on their table and have them discuss it. And so I'll leave you with this idea, because I know how people feel about taxes. And it's not an idea, it's a question. Who do you think's paying for this cemetery right now?
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Rob.
It's the taxpayers, right?
Right.
They're already paying for it. They'd be paying for it in a different way, right?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, let me jump in real quick before anybody
Sure.
responds.
Go ahead.
I appreciate the overview in you're going over the tax levy with the township trustees at the meeting and being there and all your work on the back end in regards to this. I do want to ask. I do have Mr. Semino next to me. There could be potential legal issues. And I want to ask Rob and the members, do we want to go into executive session to discuss those? Or would you rather do that here?
I don't see a problem with discussing it openly. I mean, is it, I mean,
I, on the other hand, think that the potential legal issues need to be discussed in executive session.
Well, the only problem is, I think if you look at the qualifications for discussing things in executive session, I'm not sure if potential legal issues are qualified.
right.
Has to be impending current lawsuit or something, that's defined pretty much as on the doorsteps of a lawsuit.
Well, then, can you talk a little bit about the very beginning of the meeting and what Mr. Murdoch explained to us? Because it wasn't just the $25,000 that was explained.
You mean the cost cuttings?
No, we checked that box, and I asked them directly when they came to us and said, and I apologize if I'm repeating you, Rob.
That's okay.
Their all-in amount was $135 roughly each year that they're giving to the Maple Grove Cemetery currently. With Grandview, that's $100,000. So their reasoning for the 25 is, to get to that level of spending, back to that level. So at the beginning of that meeting, when he did explain that and said, $25,000 is an option. The other option is that we could take this to the courts and see if they might be in favor of, if the city or council does not let the township or agree to let the township out of the agreement, then they would potentially go to the courts to see if they might be amenable to lowering the amount. So that's where I was coming from. So it is potential.
So basically they're saying if we don't give in, then they are going to take us to court. Correct? If we don't settle.
It explicitly say that, but
Yeah.
Okay, so just going with the history, just to clarify, they had a lawsuit that forced us to take over the cemetery. And then a second lawsuit a few years later to force us to do the Union Cemetery, to share that responsibility because they wanted a say. And now they want out. Even if we let them out, who's to say 5 years from now, somebody else isn't going to be a township trustee and say, we want back in? So is this going to be a revolving door that we're going to be dealing with every 5 to 10 years?
Right. And every time they need help, we're there. I mean, we have tried to be really good neighbors, actually. And it's like.
And as I said before, we are one. It's not Ravenna City. It's not Ravenna Township. It's Ravenna. We are one. And there are many things that we can and want to do that they have blocked us in many ways to accelerate both entities as one. And I just feel like we're on a merry-go-round with this.
And the other thing is, if they get out, that's going to increase burial costs for non-city residents, which would be primarily in the township. The exact amount isn't determined yet exactly to the exact dollar, but it will increase burial fees no matter whether it's a cremation or it's a regular burial.
Before we go any further, let me mention one correction. They didn't sue us to go into that agreement. They came to the city voluntarily wanting us. I mean, they could have just walked away at that point, but they wanted to engage the city because they, according to them, still, whoever was on township trustees wanted to have some control over the cemetery. They had, people in their community who were buried there. Andrew, did our director want to weigh in on anything at this point?
Rob, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I do recall Chad indicating that he was intimating that, you know, the courts may be something that they would be looking at, depending upon the response that the city provided them. So, you know, you can't say that, at least I couldn't say, that that was not a possibility as far as an alternative that they had been looking at or had considered prior to coming to the meeting. So,
Yeah.
you know, as far as the issue on, can you go into an executive session? I would imagine that what was provided to us on that evening, I think would open the door if you chose to do that. There would be, you know, a permittable premise on which you could go into an executive session.
Well, I mean, that's fine. I'm chairing this committee, so I'll open it up. If somebody wants to make a motion to go into executive session, we can certainly do that and then take a vote. And if we do go into a session, executive session, you'll have to turn off the YouTube feed. But I don't care. I mean, look, I've pretty much laid everything out on the table, but if people feel uncomfortable discussing how they would want to respond or discuss this, then I'll leave that open if anyone wants to make that motion. And just,
I would just add one more thing. I mean, this is
Yes.
one issue that you can make a decision on, but I also wanted to review with you a lawsuit that's been pending for quite a while, and I believe we now have resolved it with the individuals out on Murray. And
Murray.
I wanted to review that with you also.
okay, well, that's
Which I would request we go into an executive session for.
right. Well, again, I mean, I'll simply ask if anyone wants to make that motion. Did I hear somebody? Well, I'm not hearing a motion to go into executive session, so I'm assuming people are okay discussing it.
Yes, I'm okay. I'm okay discussing it openly because I
Okay.
think it's something the residents all need to hear what's going on.
Yeah.
I guess I wanted to weigh in a little bit on some of it. From the beginning, I have not heard of a reason why we would be letting the township out of the contract, except that they're short of money on that. I haven't heard an additional reason at all besides we're just short of the money, which I don't know is a good reason to let them out of the contract, especially when you point out that if we let them out, then those expenses are going to be moved over to our residents and they're going to be paying for it. So given that, I haven't heard a whole lot on why we should do that. Also, your suggestion about a additional levy to fund the cemetery, just a question, as you're envisioning that, would that then be a replacement for the city's contribution to the budget and the township's contribution? Okay, or because
it'll pay 110% of the budget they presented last, by my calculations. Now, someone like Brian needs to correct my math.
Well, let me say something also. When you do that, it's a separate taxing entity. The Maple Grove Cemetery is on its own, and whatever funds are raised are the basis on which the cemetery operates. So it's a separate tax. It's not a city. It's not a township taxing entity. It is the Maple Grove Cemetery taxing entity. So in that regard, there isn't any really outside funding, additional funding, or anything in that regard. It stands on its own 2 feet.
Yeah, and like I said, by my calculations, which definitely need review, that's 110%. So it's certainly well within what we need to run the cemetery.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not sure how to say this, except my belief is that we actually need some more money to be put into this cemetery beyond what our $300,000 budget is.
Yeah.
I think the roads need to be improved out there. I think the chapel needs to be redone. I think we need to continue to spend as much money as we have or more in tree and arbor issues. And so I'd be interested in looking at additional sources of money for the cemetery, even along the lines of hoping that that separate tax that the Union Cemetery could put together could be something that was in addition to what we're currently doing. But it doesn't sound like that's a possibility.
Because the 110%, it sounds good, but it won't cover other things, as was mentioned. The chapel, it's hard to say how much that's going to cost, and it's going to be exuberant. The roads out there need resurfaced. They need ground down and redone. They can't all be done in 1 year because of the huge cost. So that's going to be well over any projected expenses at the present time.
I hear what you're saying, Paul, but I also think that with some proper planning and, you know, some goals put in place for the cemetery, those monies can be used for that. You know, this does impact our residents. It doesn't benefit us to let the township go. And, you know, I don't think exploring a levy is a bad idea because we haven't had an increase in the budget and these things do need fixed. This is our cemetery. You know, this is part of our community. We should be maintaining it. And if we don't have the money to do that, then we need to explore other options. So I don't think it's a bad idea to look into, Rob.
Well,
And
what
I
I'm saying, go ahead.
The majority, sorry, Paul. The majority of residents do have family members there, and they do care what it looks like. And believe me, we hear about it when it's not up to par.
Yep.
And to maintain the level of maintenance that people want to see in that cemetery, we can't do on the current budget. And I think that a levy is not out of the realm of possibilities, especially for the little amount that it would cost the taxpayers in order to make the required improvements. And it's not going to be immediate. It's going to be over the next few years. But we have to look at that.
I just want to make sure people understand how it's structured. Next May, we put in a 1 mil tax, or that's what we propose to do, and you know it reverts around to the next January. If there's improvements beyond what that tax is providing, the very next year we could propose a higher mill. Now, I don't want us to get carried away with ourselves here with the taxing issue. My point is this: I think we should put everything on the table. You know, we shouldn't just dismiss things like, you know, early on in this discussion, it was like, well, what about a tax? No, we're taxing everyone too much. Let's not do that. Well, look, let's have, I don't think tonight we need to decide we're going to tax our residents. Right. I'm saying rather than make this, the alternatives to that are letting the township go and bearing the responsibility, which is never going to get us to the point where we're going to make improvements like, you know, you're talking about, Paul. The city will be strapped even more and our residents will be bearing the burden solely for the upkeep of the Maple Grove Cemetery. So we just need to consider all the alternatives. And this is just one important one, which I think is worthy of consideration for the fundamental reason that union cemeteries are structured this way. If you look at the Ohio Revised Code, the relationship between a union cemetery and a property tax is it's incorporated into the code. Why they didn't do it years ago, I don't know, but maybe we're just catching up. There's going to be some people who respond to this, maybe even the paper, the city is pushing a tax out there. The other thing is we do want to have agreement with the township. They have a say in whether or not there's going to be a property tax because the property tax will be levied on their residents. So this is just the beginning stages. I don't want people to rush to the conclusion that this is the low hanging fruit that we're going to pick right now. I just think before we engage in a discussion about letting them off the hook in a sense and taking on the sole responsibility of running the cemetery, we need to look at all the alternatives. And I hope that when they meet to discuss it, they take this under consideration as well. And then down the road, we can then come together and see if we can work something out. And maybe this will be a resolution, maybe another resolution will help this. But I guess one question I think that we need to have addressed to some extent tonight is there anybody willing to put on the table the idea of letting the township out of our agreement? Is that something anybody wants to push forward to either have a vote about or a further discussion about?
I believe that they should not be just let go.
Okay. So we're not going to, I mean, because that could be something we could push forward to the next meeting. And if there's no desire to do that from this committee meeting, then no action right now is where we're at. And if the committee is willing to, then I think the next step is to respond to the township that we had this discussion, what the results of this discussion were, and then engage with them these other options other than consenting to letting them out of the agreement.
I agree.
Okay. Any other considerations about the cemetery agreement with the township?
I guess I just had a procedural question on if we did move forward with the idea of a levy for the cemetery, what body would vote to make that happen? Would it be the three trustees that are on or the three members that are on the cemetery board, or would it be a different entity that would make that vote for that to happen?
It would be the three trustees.
The three. And so
let me, I want to maybe read exactly what the code says about that, if I can find it. Yeah, so on the day of the first regular meeting of the legislative authority in the month of May, and that's us, the city council, for the purpose of determining the rate of tax to be levied upon taxable property of the municipal corporation and the township for such purposes. Upon passage of a joint resolution by a majority of the members of the legislative authority and the board of trustees fixing the rate of taxation, the clerk of the municipal corporation, that's Chelsea, shall certify such rate to the county auditor for assessment and collection. So yeah, it's a joint resolution by a majority of the members of the city council and the trustees. Now, unless I'm reading that wrong, that means we add up the number of people on city council, we add in the three trustees, and whatever a majority of that number is determines the outcome. Because it's a joint resolution. It's one, it's not two separate ones. Am I reading that right, Mr. Semino?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's how it would be done. Are there other questions or comments?
I just, again, want to stress, thanks, Rob, again, for all of your hard work and then laying it out tonight. And I do want to just stress one point, that even as we're discussing these 4 points, that it sounds like, and if I can speak on behalf of council right now, that we're all committed to the cemetery and its future, and discussing, again, stressing what Rob just said, discussing all ways to continue to fund the cemetery, whatever those options are.
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks, Andrew.
There was one additional concern that was not covered, and that was they brought up the issue of their in what they consider to be inadequate representation with the 2:1 ratio.
But isn't that spelled out in the ordinances?
Beg your pardon?
Isn't that spelled out in the ordinances on a union cemetery?
But here's the thing. So it's interesting. And again, it goes to Cheryl, your comment about how this historically came about with the agreement. The Ohio Revised Code says there's 3 members of the cemetery board of trustees. It doesn't spell out how it could be arranged. And by the way, a union cemetery could involve more than one city and more than one township. It doesn't have to be a one-to-one correspondence, but it's only 3. So we can't add more than the number we have. But the Ohio Revised Code doesn't say 2 from the city or 1 from the township or whatever. So they could theoretically, according to the code, have established a thing where maybe some years there's 2 trustees and 2 council, but the agreement spells it out.
Right.
With the township says specifically 2 members of city council. So now that's something we could renegotiate, I suppose.
Well, and one of their current township trustees was part of the original setting this up.
Right. That's, well.
So I guess I don't see a reason in changing it. And when you look at the number of council people compared to the number of trustees, if you do a percentage, we would have 2 to 1. And
right. I'm
the
just saying that, I mean, it could have been arranged.
Right.
We had, let's say every 3rd year, they get 2 people on the trustees, or I don't know how the elections are done. You know, what a term is or any of that stuff. But as the agreement stands now, they agreed to allow us 2 members and 1, and maybe they don't remember that. I don't know. But you're right, Mayor, they did bring that up. I'm just not so sure there's an easy resolution to that. Obviously, a better resolution would be more members of trustees, but that's not going to happen.
Well, I only mentioned that in the interest of fairness of what was discussed.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because they did bring that up. I'm just saying I'm not sure what the resolution of that would be based on our agreement.
If they have more than 1, then they're having a public meeting. It's no longer a committee or a commission because it's 2 out of 3 would be there.
And that's why we only met with 1.
Right. So.
Oh, yeah.
So they need to be thinking on that level. I mean, we could have 2 council people at a meeting. We could have 3. Sort of. But, you know, it's different numbers. It's different ratios. So they got to look at the big picture. And then 2, look at the percentage of the budget. Who supplies what percentage of the funds to fund it? They should get a little bit, you know, whoever has more money in the game should have a little bit more say.
Well, that was their issue. Their amount goes up every year while ours does not. And that's because they have a lot of housing growth.
Right.
They have more property that's being developed. We don't have as much property, but I mean, we could change that. I mean, there are ways that we could gain more property for the city if we wanted to, but.
I can't think of a worse problem, sarcastically, than having property values go up, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
If I could just interject real quick, Rob. When we had, correct me if I'm wrong again, the longest discussion we had about anything at that meeting was when Rob was laying out the option of the tax levy. All other options, and I even asked, can we check, and I said, can we just check the box about part-time workers, about healthcare, that you do not want to discuss those items? And they said no. So I just want to reiterate, we didn't get into the details. It was, here's your option, we want out, or the potential of legal.
There was a brief discussion because Mark Gabriel had provided some information about the budgeting over the years, and what, and the big area was healthcare, but it seems like they're doing pretty well because they were grandfathered in and so forth. And I think there was agreement amongst all of us that looking at those measures, while interesting over time, and we should always keep our eyes on the cost of operating the cemetery and make efficiencies where we can, aren't going to be the issue there's no way we can do that and solve their problem. That was not enough to help them, control their costs. And they agree. I agree that so we didn't have a long discussion about that because it wasn't going to go anywhere.
And what's helped with their insurance costs is being grandmothered in for so long. And they've been trying to keep it as a grandmother clause, and that was a huge decrease in their insurance expenses by far.
Right. Okay, so if there's no more discussion, I mean, there will be more discussion, but for tonight, if we can kind of end the discussion, we're not taking any official action that needs to be pushed forward. But we will be, it'll be interesting to see what their response is and their discussions about this issue, and then have to take it from there. All right, so the last thing on the agenda is management update. Mr. Mayor, do we have any?
I wouldn't dare.
All right, then I will call the planning committee meeting adjourned at 6:22 p.m.
All right, at 6:22, I'll call the Streets and Sidewalks Committee meeting to order. We have one item on the agenda this evening. It's the ODOT agreement. The state had some extra money this year. So we'd like to enter into agreement with them to pave Diamond and Mill. This project wasn't slated until 2023, but with the extra money, we're going to be able to do it in the spring of next year. The state will pay up to $268,000 of this project. It's estimated to come in at about $408,000, which would leave the city's cost roughly $140,000. Those bids usually come in a little bit low, but we won't know until they go out. So this is a great opportunity to get some roads paved that are in dire need of it. This will also, those funds will also be used to put in ADA ramps at the curbs that need those as well.
How much of Diamond and Mill? And
the paving will go from Summit to Mill, and then from Mill to Sycamore.
Much needed. It's wonderful news to have this come early.
So this is a $400,000 budget at Will project. Our portion will be 140 roughly. A huge savings to the city. The money will come out of the paving fund for next year. Did I cover everything, Bob?
Yes, you did a fabulous job.
Thank you. Unless there's any objections, we'll go ahead and move this project forward.
Move it forward.
Okay. Is there a management update? I believe he said no. Okay. So at 6:25, I will adjourn the Streets and Sidewalks Committee meeting.
it's 6:25. Utility would be next. And I know the first item on the agenda to be presented by Mr. Bowen. I have no information on this topic.
I will read the tracking sheet.
Okay.
Those of us who have been around long enough should almost be able to recite Mr. Bowen's tracking sheet. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to submit an application for the Ohio Public Works Commission funding for Hillcrest, Zeta, and Spruce Waterline Project. Further authorizing the mayor, in the event the application is approved, to agree to participate in funding of the city's local share for the subject OPWC project and declaring an emergency. This is our typical OPWC project. I think this is year 34. And we would bid this project We would typically bid this project out in the spring and be able to sign contracts with the contractor at the beginning of July. That's it.
All right, sounds fantastic. That'll eliminate future water breaks and
Hydrant issues.
Right.
We'll resolve some hydrant issues also.
All right, then those will be good for decades to come.
Mhm.
Okay, if no comments or concerns about that, and the final thing on the agenda would be for the new sludge contract for the wastewater plant. The only thing there, it's a 2-year contract for hauling out sludge and taking care of that. The cost is to be going up approximately 2 to 3 cents per ton for the year. It will be the same hauler that's been contracted for many years. The sludge is transported out by semi periodically whenever it accumulates to a certain point that it needs to be moved out. So if there are any comments about that, that's something of necessity.
Move it forward.
Nope, sounds good.
In
Okay,
reading through it, the contract, there's a whole lot of stuff that I don't know about here. The biosolids and what they're like and how they're going to load them and where does the grit come from that we're disposing of grit and trash. Very interesting. I plan to do some more research on that to find out what that's all about, but not at this time.
I'm going to get
Tim, if I could recommend, go meet with Mr. Brigant and have him give you a tour of the plant.
It's on my list of things to do. I want to
It's pretty
do that.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Great job.
I was going to suggest that to you.
Okay.
The pandemic has kind of interfered with that for us, I think.
Yeah.
Take your nose plugs.
Yeah. I can't imagine there's a lot of companies that do this, so.
I could go into the process, but I'll leave it till when you visit.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
just
Okay.
don't go in the heat of the summer, Tim.
Yeah, it looks like the contract's a good contract.
Yes. Okay, is there any management update pertaining to these topics?
Oh,
Okay, at 6:30, I believe, we'll end the utility meeting.
Right. I guess that's me then. 6:30, we are calling Community and Economic Development Committee. We have one item on the agenda. It's the ordinance to appropriate $48,500 for debris removal at 645 Chestnut Street. They are preparing to hopefully demolish this building sooner than later. We've had issues with trying to keep people out and trying to keep people safe inside. So this would have to be done before the building could be demolished. Mr. Mayor, what do you have to add on this?
well, you've said it all. The
Okay.
problem is that the building is full of debris that needs to be gotten rid of. And Mr. West has worked very hard on trying to get this to a place where we can get this building torn down. Mr. Semino has also worked on this project on the legal end of it, of trying to track down all of the relatives of this person to get things signed so we can proceed with the demolishment. But we have to get rid of the debris that's inside before they can begin the demolishing. And this figure is the best price we've been able to get. The other person that he talked to wanted $76,000 to do it. Most of the people came and looked at it and wouldn't even make a bid. They said, this is too much for me. So quite honestly, as much as I hate spending that money, that's our best bargain. The estimated cost of demolishing this building is $650,000. So the city certainly doesn't want to end up on that end of the stick. Keep in mind, we do not own this property. We're trying to get it cleared up and get permission from the judge to go ahead and take it down.
A question that I have is, why can't the stuff that's in there just be in the demolished building and go out when it's demolished?
Because this is being demolished for the most part at no cost. They're going to be reclaiming the brick and the wood and those sorts of things within the building. They cannot, you have to see the inside of this building to know how bad it is. You can't even walk in some places. That they're saying, they estimate that it's probably going to take 1 to 2 weeks with heavy equipment to clean that building out.
Okay, so it's just making the reclaiming of the demolished materials easier by that debris being removed.
Yes.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any other questions on this? Are we good with moving it forward then?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Move that one forward. And do we have a management update?
The only thing I would say, we're rapidly coming on Thanksgiving. And as we do so, the rules for dealing with the pandemic are still a moving target with that. And the need to be careful is much stronger now than it was in the past. It's very easy to pick up this disease. We are going to put the Christmas tree up, I think this Saturday. And we are going to be putting just lights on it. We are not going to put ornaments on it. I can't imagine where our ornaments would be if it was up yesterday when that storm came through. Working with Ryan at the chamber for the lighting of the tree is going to be virtual. We're not going to encourage a crowd to come downtown as a crowd for this. There are merchants that are going to be open that night, and you need to check the chamber website. It lists who they are. But keep in mind, we're trying not to draw a huge crowd that just fills into a dozen or so stores and everybody's close together with that. So these are things that we're having to adjust daily. But we will be putting the tree up on Saturday, probably not trimming it until the following week.
All right, well, thank you so much. I know it's been tough in the chambers and Main Street, and a lot of organizations have done a really great job of being creative and thinking outside the box with a lot of these things. So it's been nice to have.
Planning on running a window decorating contest, last I'd heard, although I did not get to talk to Julie this past Friday. It's busy.
Well, thank you so much for that update. I'm going to end our meeting then at 6:35 p.m.
And at 6:35, I will call the Information Systems Committee meeting to order. First item on the agenda, yes, we're bringing it up again, Gary Bishop or IT consultant. I know the last time that we discussed it, we had talked about having Heather possibly write up a process for hiring, expectations for an IT consultant. We've had several other IT issues come up between then and now. I've not seen anything as far as anything in the works. And my concern is because it's such an intricate detail that if we had someone that could write it up to explain exactly what we need from this IT person, then we would also have someone that could write up exactly what we need in order to put it out for an RFP or anything else. I think we're kind of in a catch-22 here. We're in this loop where none of us have this knowledge and experience that we're seeking and need. I would rather sooner than later, at least get Gary on board to get us to that point, help direct us to getting RFPs written up and let us know what we need. We need this guidance between us and Quality IP and with all the cameras and the different things that we're needing. So I did ask to put this back on the agenda to keep it in the forefront of our minds and hopefully keep moving. So if anybody has anything, comments, concerns, questions.
No, I think what you said makes a lot of sense, Cheryl. None of us have the expertise, and I think some of the stuff that has come before us and the newer stuff even, it's kind of hard for some of us, I think, to really make a decision on what's best and what's not best. And I think it's a creative idea, and I think it's something that we should consider moving forward on.
Thank you.
Chair,
Oh,
I have just one question. What is Gary's fee?
We haven't established that really. I mean, we had talked about it briefly at previous committee meetings. I mean, he's certainly negotiable to whatever we want to work on. And his fee would only be as an as needed basis, most likely. I mean, we're not going to pay him unless we specifically call him and say, hey, Gary, we're doing this security camera update. We'd like you to attend advice on it. So it would be in our control how many hours he was charged. It'd be like any other consulting agreement.
Okay.
Or anything we use a consulting agreement for, we would call them as needed. They would provide the service, and then we do that.
So I'll weigh in because I was sort of like the voice of let's explore this some more. And I'll be the first to say, and I think Cheryl kind of hit the nail on the head in the sense that when I look for equivalent types arrangements, it was very hard to find. And trying to figure it out myself, well, she's right. I mean, I wouldn't know what to put in a, request for proposal or whatever you want to call it. So, and I do think time is sort of slipping away in a sense. So I'm okay giving it a try. Let's see how it works out. I do think though, before we take action, we do need to see the contract.
Right. Oh, definitely.
I agree with what Brian said. If it's as needed and that kind of thing, and we're not committing to anything unless issues come up. And I do see a big void in not having somebody like him helping represent the city in a way that provides that, I don't know what the right word is, but objective,
like level of protection.
Objective look at what we're dealing with. When the consultant raises issues, we want to have a counterbalance there of some sort to give us to translate the techno speak into something that maybe we understand better.
And I think sometimes
with it
might be the possibility where they suggest something, but he might have a better idea that's more cost effective.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. You said it better than me. Thank you.
All right, so we'll move this forward.
Yes.
Well, I guess my question too, I'm sorry, Cheryl, but is there any council action that even needs to be made for this? I guess that's my other concern. Is there any
only the contract approval?
Right.
Yeah, I think we have to approve the mayor's signature on the contract.
Right, so we need to get the contract drafted and approve the mayor to sign it.
Okay, a contract with Gary.
Right.
Okay, very good.
All right, so then that brings us to the second item, the managed security agreement with Quality IP. They had proposed back a couple months ago due to the spam email that was sent out as a test and different things. They proposed a couple different options with the advanced scan protection, $2 per month per user, multi-factor authentication. They provided training, different things like that. Just something that I want to keep on the top of our minds as we move forward. We did purchase the cybersecurity insurance, which helps, that advances us from what we were before. There was a part of it, and Brian, you can correct me, there was a part of what they were offering that can just be added to our Outlook. That is the advanced scan protection, correct?
Yes, I think that was the $2 now.
Right, and we can do that without the other portion.
Yes, they did say they would do that, yes.
So it would be kind of a more cost-effective way of even protecting us more than what we are today. Just an advanced scan protection on the emails of all the accounts. I believe we have 131 or 139 accounts. I just feel like it doesn't hurt to have that for $2 per month per user. But I'd really like to hear from everybody else on what they think.
Can I ask real quick, Brian or the mayor, how many people will be working remotely coming up? Will anybody from City Hall? As we're platooning, is anybody going to be working from home? Are they going to be using laptops? What antivirus is currently on there? And when I think this would benefit those people is my point. Because we're seeing, again, as the mayor was alluding to, the trends going up. And if we're seeing more people working at home, to me, this is a no-brainer, but.
I mean, I agree, Andrew. We are, we're starting to look at some people who do have laptops. I'm looking even in my own department and others around that we are trying to get people set up so they can work on the network. But we're only going to have people work on a network that Quality IP actually sets their computer up, so it'll have the same securities if it's in the office or at home. We're not having anybody work on their own private laptops with any sensitive information, all that kind of stuff. So Quality IP, actually, to their credit, they're very, very, very stringent about not allowing that. That's, as they probably should be, because they set up our networks and our securities, pretty tightly. So they don't want people just going rogue and doing their own stuff.
Yeah, and I think anyone, just to add, anyone with access to the network, if they're using a laptop, it doesn't have to be, I know Cheryl just said that there's 130 plus people with email addresses, but circling back to our original conversation, everyone doesn't need this. I shouldn't say doesn't need it, but it isn't required to have it. But I think department heads, those people that are dealing with, potentially sensitive information, should immediately go to the top, and we should discuss those people, those individuals first, to see, what the cost could look like.
Yeah, and this would be another good thing if Gary was involved too. He could kind of help us look at who would have involved, and then I assume you're talking about the $2 a month protection that we're talking about, Andrew.
Yeah, and weren't we supposed to get a quote back after we had the cybersecurity insurance in hand, where he was going to follow up and let us know what that cost might look like? Because I remember having a brief conversation with him, even breaking it down, as I just said, to potentially just department heads that would have access, or just the security software on their email. Has there been any update?
Yeah, we did talk about that, and we also talked. Well, I'm not sure if that was related to the $2 a month thing, or if that was more related to the.
I think that was more related to the other option, the managed security option, that was originally like $6 per month, because that was the one that was quoted with the 139 users. So even if we only put it on 10 computers or 10 people's accounts, we got a better deal doing the full 139 rather than just a select few.
We could get some. I could ask them for some specifics, like if we wanted to whittle down, like who we thought would be the most important ones to cover, and see what they thought on that.
Well, I don't know that it's really negotiable. I mean, if there's X number of email accounts, I mean, this is kind of software that's attached to an email account, regardless of whether you show up at work at City Hall, have a laptop. There's other security measures, like if you have a laptop, maybe we could encrypt the hard drive, things like that. but I don't think that's part of this plan. I think this is based upon the number of accounts, and I think that's why it's at that figure. They're not people. They're not going to pay. We're not going to pay us. We're not going to pay them $2 for 10 accounts.
Well, I think that's the point. I think we need clarified too, because they're giving us a lower rate than what is advertised on the website. And I don't know if you can remember, Cheryl, but I can't remember the name of it.
It was originally like $10 per.
Yeah. It was a lot
We
more.
were significantly like at $6 per, we were like $4 off.
Yeah.
Per.
I think that point needs clarified, but I understand where you're coming from, Rob.
Yeah, I thought they were going to give us a presentation or something. So this thing kind of got stalled because of the other component,
Right.
Video training thing, which seemed like a lot more money. And I don't know. I only go by my own experience with these things, that I find them less valuable than real live training. Obviously, we're not going to have in-person training right now. But I thought we were going to decouple that and go forward with this idea, and then it still just kind of got stalled. But I'm all in favor of going ahead with the software component of it. I thought they were going to come back with another alternative to the training component, but I think that's not happened yet. But I don't know if they're willing to. I'd say go ahead. Let's just get this done. If we can by the next meeting, if they're willing to give us a quote that just has the managed software and not the training.
Okay. Perfect. Is there any management updates?
Can we just write into that? I got to push back a little bit on this, because I feel like you're giving somebody a life jacket and not teaching them how to swim. So in some respects, I think that we should take a look at some of the training.
Well, the only reason I brought it up is
I understand breaking it down just to see where the costs are, but I think the training could be worth it, especially seeing those numbers that came back with the phishing email.
I don't disagree with that. My point was this, that they presented us a single quote that had both components in it. We all seem to universally agree with the $2 per account part of it. We wanted some more questions answered, and we're being stalled because of that other part. I'm all for it if they want to give us another, or at least explain the benefits of that other thing. But in the meantime, we were concerned that they were joined, and if we decoupled them, the price would go up, and they said no. So I'm okay with going ahead with whatever we all agree upon right now, and then continue to investigate the training component. Maybe they'll convince us the original proposal is what we want, but I think we need a back and forth and some feedback on what our concerns are.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, we can check, Brian and I, between us, we can check and see if they're available for committee of the whole to do a presentation, answer any final questions on that. And in the meantime, have a quote broke down for both products at that time.
Sounds good.
Very good.
Is there any management updates?
No.
Mayor's easy today.
So your computer's working just fine, Mr. Seaman.
Yeah, mine is.
With nothing else, I will be adjourning at 6:50.
All right. Well, that does it for this evening then.